Happy Winning Wednesday. I have fun stuff to talk about today. Um, so, get comfortable, you know, settle in your body, feet on the floor, feel your body in your seat. Take one slow breath before we begin. So, what I want to talk about today is not something I necessarily want you to receive from the neck up, right? Like, I want it to land in your body because I'm going to touch on something kind of real, and it requires you to actually be here, not halfway in your head, not halfway thinking about what you're going to do for lunch, not thinking about, all the chores that need to be done or where you need to go or whatever. So, one more breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Good. Now we can begin. So, I want to ask you something, and I want you to kind of resist the urge to answer it quickly. I want you to sit with the question for just a moment before you reach a response. Who are you underneath all the conditioning? Not the role you play, not the title you hold, not the version of you that shows up to manage or perform or produce or, keep the world running. Not the good mom, the reliable partner, the professional, the healer, the helper, the one who holds it all together. Like actual you. The one that existed before the world got its hands on you, before you learned what was acceptable, what was too much, before you understood certain parts of yourself that you felt like needed to be hidden or managed or quieted down or made smaller or edited, entirely in order to be loved. So, who were you before you learned to be who you needed to be? So, that's what we're talking about today. And so, I want to warn you right now, this conversation might feel a little uncomfortable in places because not because anything's wrong with you, but because the truth of who you actually are has been living underneath a lot of weight, for a long time. And so when you start to lift the weight even just a little, like it feels a little bit strange, it's unfamiliar. We've lived up until this point, up until now, with these certain identities or things that we believe about ourselves. So, it's like kind of like putting on a piece of clothing that you forgot you own and then realizing it still fits. So it's not discomfort, it's more like this is recognition. So stay with me. So let's start at the beginning. Like, because I throw out the word conditioning a lot in, brain science and, spiritual and self-development spaces without actually being clear what it actually means and where it actually comes from. So conditioning is not something that happened to you in one dramatic moment, right? Like it's not one conversation or one experience or one person who decided your worth. Basically, it's like 1,000 small little tiny moments that stack up upon each other and accumulate over a lifetime, and then set into these, deeply embedded beliefs about who you are and what you deserve, and how safe it is to be fully yourself, and what you need to do or be or become in order to receive love from others. And so the part that's really important to understand here is most of your conditioning was not installed intentionally, right? It was not like some conspiracy against you or people who were grooming you or shaping you, doing the best they could. They were doing the best they could, with what they had, right? But they were also carrying their own conditioning, right? Like their own process wounds, their own inherited beliefs about the world and what it means to be worthy and loved and enough. So they pass it on to you, right? As all humans do, not through like malice or they to do evil, right? But through the energy of the home that you grew up in, like through what was celebrated, what was criticized, through what got you more love and what seemed to push love away, through the rules, whether they're spoken or unspoken, right? Like about who you were allowed to be in that family, in that environment, in that world. So, neuroscience, of course, tells us that the human brain is the most impressionable. It's your imprint years are between 0 and 7. During those years, your brain is operating primarily in a theta brainwave state. It is essentially hypnotic, highly receptive state. You are thinking that everything that comes into your awareness is truth. And you're not able to filter yet through critical thinking. You can't evaluate whether you're being taught what you're being taught about the world is actually true. You just absorb it and you download it. And then it becomes your operating system that you run for the rest of your life. And unless something, of course, comes along to interrupt that program. And so think about that for a moment. Your core beliefs that you hold about your worth, your safety, your lovability, your potential, your right to actually take up space in this world, most of it was formed before you had the cognitive ability to actually question it. So you don't choose your programming. Basically, you inherit it. And so here's what makes it even more complicated. The programming that typically is designed to keep you safe, every belief, protective pattern, every way that you learn to make yourself smaller or more palatable or less threatening, it serves a purpose at that time. It's your nervous system best attempt to ensure that you will be loved and accepted and safe in the environment that you're in. So the problem is that you grew up, you left that environment, but your programming still stayed the same. And so now you're trying to build a life and a business and relationships and, the sense of self using that operating system that was written for a child that was just trying to survive. And it keeps producing outcomes that don't match what you consciously want. And that's because it was never designed for what you're trying to create at this moment in time. So I want to go a tad bit deeper into this because conditioning, it does not just give you beliefs, it gives you characters. It gives you roles or scripts or, and of course, after enough time of playing this character, you start to forget that you are the actor and you start to think that the character is the person, the identity. So let me explain what I mean. Very early in life, most of us receive feedback, again, not always in words, but often just in like that kind of felt sense of the environment about which version of us was welcome and which was not. Parts that were safe to show and what needed to be hidden. What expressions got warmth and which ones got silence or criticism or withdrawal or, when we're told to be quiet or go to your room or stop doing that, right? So we start building this character. This is a version of ourselves that's designed to, like, we want to maximize love. That's our whole intention as a child. We just want love, right? And so we want to minimize as much rejection as we can in the specific environments that we're in. So for some of us, the character was the good girl, never causing problems, never asking for too much, saying yes, managing her emotions that it felt, so others would feel comfortable, and always putting everyone else first. So the good girl learns that her value was in how useful she was, and then that she was most loved when she was most helpful. And so she became, incredibly competent and also incredibly visible at the same time. So for others, the character might have been the achiever, the one who learned that, you get love and approval through performing, through grades and accomplishment and productivity. And so the achiever learns that, she determined that, that was how she proves her worth. Like she never stops doing, even when she's exhausted or empty, because stopping feels like danger. It's like you're disappearing. And so um, others, it might be caretaker, the one who's so attuned to everyone else's emotional state that she can't even recognize her own, who learned so early that her safety depends on managing the moods and needs of other people around her. And, she almost becomes psychic about other people's feelings and needs, and then completely numbs out herself. So for others, it might be learning to disappear entirely. They make themselves small, quiet, like unobtrusive, that you barely exist in the room that you're in. Because somewhere along the way, maybe she learned that being seen was dangerous, that having needs was dangerous, that taking up space was dangerous. So none of these characters are wrong, right? Like none of them are shameful. Every single one of them is actually an act of brilliance, like creative, deeply intelligent adaptation to your environment. Your nervous system did exactly what it was needing to do to keep you safe. So now, guess what? You're an adult and you're still playing this character. And somewhere underneath all the performing and you know, the hiding and, being invisible, like the real you still sitting quietly in the back of the room, like watching, just waiting for the day that you finally realize that the audition is over. We're not in the play anymore, right? You already got the part, you've been playing it for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, right? And that you're allowed to actually allowed, you can put that script down. Easier said than done, right? But how does this play out in real life? Because I think that's the one thing, to understand it conceptually, and another thing to entirely to see it operating in your actual daily existence. Your conditioning runs the show in every single area of your life. Every single one. Like how you show up in relationships, how you interact with others, how you, drive in traffic. Like it does so like seamlessly, so automatically, so below the level of conscious awareness that most of the time you don't even realize that it's happening. And it runs the show in your relationships, patterns keep repeating, dynamics that, feel uncomfortably familiar, like the way you shut down when you need to open up. Maybe you over explain and over justify and over apologize everything, or abandon yourself to keep the peace. The way you either cannot receive love or cannot get enough of it. None of this is random. All of it is the programming doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's recreating the emotional environment of your earliest relationships, because that is what feels like normal to you. That's what feels like home to your nervous system. So even when it's not actually what you want, right? So it runs the show in business. Maybe it's a ceiling that you can't break through, or, you're terrified of the visibility, or, the patterns of getting close to the next level and somehow just finding a way to throw it all in the trash, to sabotage it. And so your ability to change, uh, or inability to charge what you're worth, the chronic over deliverability and under receiving, the way success sometimes feels like it's more threatening than failure, because some part of you learned early on that standing out was not safe, or that things will get taken from you, right? It runs the show in your body. The way you push past limits because rest feels lazy. The way you use food or exercise or busyness as emotional regulation, or the way you've been at war with your own physical form for most of your life because you learned that your body was a problem that you had to solve rather than a home to be inhabited. Like it runs the show in your relationships with yourself. The way your inner critic speaks to you and the standards that you hold yourself to that you would never hold anyone else to. Isn't that funny? In the relentless self-monitoring of self-editing and self-improvement and never quite arriving at the destination of being enough. Because guess what? Enough was never a destination in the program. Enough was always just barely out of reach because a nervous system that believes it's not yet enough will always, always, always find more evidence to confirm that belief. It's not a character flaw. This is neurological. This is how the brain works. It filters through the lens of its existing beliefs and finds confirmation what it already thinks is true. And this is called confirmation bias. And it's not a bug in the system, it's a feature. Or so it thinks, right? It's the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. Create a consistent, predictable experience of reality, right? Like the problem is when you have the conditioning and the filter and the lens that was installed by fear or survival by a child who needed to make sense of the world, that was something, the world was confusing or sometimes unsafe or sometimes not equipped to love her the way that she deserved to be loved. The lens is still in place, filtering until you recognize it as a filter, as a lens, as the constructive perspective rather than an object of truth. You keep seeing the same world, confirming the same beliefs, running the same patterns, wondering why nothing changes, no matter how much work you do. So here's the piece that I think is the most profound and probably the most underestimated. Conditioning does not just affect your behavior, it shapes your identity. It shapes who you believe yourself to be at the most fundamental level. And here's why that matters so much. You will always, always act in accordance to your self-concept. Always. And that's not because you're weak or undisciplined or, lacking willpower, but because your behavior is always seeking to confirm and maintain the identity you hold about yourself. So if deep down you believe that you're someone that has to struggle with money, with relationships, with health, with worth, like you will consciously create evidence of that struggle. Not because you want to suffer, but because the familiar, even when it hurts, feels safer to the nervous system than the unknown. And if deep down you believe that you are someone who's too much, too loud, too emotional, too needy, too, sensitive, too ambitious, you will unconsciously manage yourself down to fit that belief. You shrink before anyone else gets the chance to tell you to. You edit before you're asked to. You will apologize for your presence before anyone has expressed any kind of problem with it. Does that sound familiar? So if deep down you believe that love is conditional, that you have to earn it, perform for it, sacrifice yourself for it, you will maintain relationships that will confirm that belief. And you will wonder why you always end up feeling, unseen or unappreciated, or like you just give so much and never receive. And so this is all the invisible architecture of your life. So the beliefs you hold about who you are determine what you allow yourself to receive. and what you allow yourself to create and what you allow yourself to become. And again, most of those beliefs are installed before you had any say in the matter. So this is not judgment or diagnosis or any of that. Like it's an invitation. Because the moment that you see the architecture, the moment you step back far enough to recognize the program running underneath your choices, and it's the moment you gain the power to change it. So you cannot rewrite the code that you cannot see. But once you see it, everything becomes possible. So let's talk about the part real quickly, like that the conditioning buried. Who you actually are is not a mystery. It's not something that you have to go to a retreat to find or excavate through years of therapy or, earn through spiritual work or, like any of that. Like it's something that you actually already know. You've already have known it. It's just that the noise of the programming gets so loud that, it becomes hard to hear. And who you actually are shows up in the moments when you forget that you need to perform. Like it shows up as the thing that you get completely lost in, the thing that makes time disappear. Like we talked about joy last week. The things that you would do for free and have done for free because doing itself is like a reward. It's not a hobby, but your soul showing you what aliveness feels like for you specifically. So it shows up in the opinion that you have that maybe you never say out loud to people because you're afraid that, how you be perceived, or the perspective that you hold to keep to yourself because you've learned that your voice sometimes makes people uncomfortable and that you've decided that their comfort is worth more than your truth. So that unsaid thing, that's you. Just you, the real you, trying to get out. And it shows up in the thing that, makes you cry when you're not even sure why, or the song or the scene in the movie, or the moment of beauty that catches you off guard and opens something in your chest before you have a chance to close it down and shut it off. And it's not weakness. It's sensitivity, it's depth, it's, you're being porous enough to let the world actually touch you. And so it shows up in what makes you laugh until you cannot breathe. Maybe the laugh that embarrasses you a little because it's maybe too loud or too goofy or, too genuinely delighted by something that might seem silly. Like, the laugh is probably the most honest thing about you, and it's completely unconditioned. It's completely free. And it shows up, in the things that make you angry, the injustices that you just can't walk past without feeling something, and the things that are wrong that you can't pretend or find, the places where your values are so deep and so real that they override your conditioning towards agreeableness and, compliance. That anger, channeled, conscious anger, is one of the most powerful forces available to you. It's the signal that something matters enough to fight for. And you're made up of all of these things, the laughter and the tears and the anger and the unsaid opinions and the things you lost that comes from love. Like, you're made of preferences and passions and quirks and ways of seeing the world that, entirely your own and entirely irreplaceable. That's who you are. Not the performance, not the character, not the carefully curated version of yourself that you have been playing this entire time. The full, unedited, magnificent, maybe sometimes inconvenient, sometimes, well, actually completely, always irreplaceable, actual you. And she's been waiting a very long time to come home. So how do we do this, right? Like, how do we find our way back to ourselves before the conditioning has been running for so long that it feels like identity? So the first thing I want to say to you is this: you do not do it by destroying the character you built. You know, a lot of people talk about ego death, right? But this character has kept you safe for a long time. It's served you. You can hold it in gratitude even as you begin to lay it to rest, lay it down. You come back to yourself through awareness first. This is exactly what we're doing in Everyday Quantum. So we just started yesterday. It was kind of the welcome call, but you know, the core message here is that you cannot change what you cannot see. So the practice begins with watching, observing, bringing awareness to it, noticing where you're performing versus where you're actually present, and noticing when you agree and maybe didn't mean it, when you said yes when you should have said no, or when you shrink before you're being asked to, or notice when you're about to abandon yourself to keep the peace, or none of this we judge. We're not judging any of it. We just want to see it. We bring awareness. That's the beginning of everything. And then you come back through the body, because conditioning lives in the mind, but the real you lives in the body. The body knows things the mind has learned to override. The body has preferences. The body has a yes and no that we don't even realize is telling us yes or no. And when you learn to listen to your body, it's actually telling you, like the tightening, the expanding, the holding, the releasing. You start to have access to an intelligence that the conditioned mind has been drowning out for years. And then you come back through the breath. The breath is the fastest pathway to the nervous system, and the nervous system is where the conditioning is stored. So when you breathe slowly, fully, with intention, you're interrupting the automatic program. You create pause between the stimulus and the response. And in that pause, you get to choose. Not from habit or fear, from actual conscious awareness of who you are and what you actually want. You come back through permission. Permission to have preferences, permission to say no, permission to take up space, permission to be too much or not enough or completely different than what was expected of you. And then we come back through repetition. So it's not, we're not leading one big breakthrough through one session or one retreat or one moment of clarity that changes everything forever. But this is all, daily practice. So this is part, again, what we're doing in Everyday Quantum. We're bringing that 5D consciousness into 3D living. This is how we create change, by little things, day by day. Every time you say what you actually think, every time you feel the pull instead of the should, every time you let yourself be delighted by something without immediately making it practical, you're coming home to yourself. So again, we just started yesterday. We had a welcome call. If this is something that's kind of, pulling at you, we're still accepting people. Like, we have a small class, and I love giving everybody the attention. And I also really, really love that when we have our things that we talk about in the beginning, and then we pull out our little paper at the end, and we notice how much has changed in such a short amount of time with just these little tiny daily practices and working it into your everyday life. Like, oh my gosh, it's just so amazing to see. So what I want to leave you with today, there's still time to join Everyday Quantum, but also, the version of you that got conditioned into smallness was never the real you. She was a brilliant, creative, deeply intelligent adaptation of an environment that could not always hold the full truth of who you were. She deserves compassion, not your contempt. But she is not who you are. Who you are is the one underneath, the one who still laughs too loud sometimes, the one who still gets completely lost in the thing that lights her up, and the one who has the opinions that she almost never says, and beauty she never shows, and a depth of feeling she's learned to manage because it felt like too much. And so that version of you is not too much. She is exactly enough. And she is exactly what the world has been missing. So show up for her. All right, guys. I hope you have an amazing week. That's all I got for you today, and we will talk to you next time. Bye now.